Welcome to McDougall. On today's show, Dr. Richard Neal will show you how to tame the stress in your life. Hello, I'm Wayne Judd. And now the man about whom it is said most often, you know, he's right after all, Dr. John.
Thank you, Wayne. Wayne, I was just talking to one of the people in the audience, and he said to me, I'm 75 years old, and I drink coffee every day. Look at me.
Uh-oh.
Well, big deal. The human body's an absolute miracle. It puts up with tremendous abuse. It puts up with 2 packs of cigarettes, a half a bottle of whiskey, and grease every day, and it lives.
And he'd probably cite George Burns as
with the cigars
good
and
reason to
everything.
smoke a cigar.
So, you know, people should stop, instead of saying, how much abuse can I give my body and it still lives, they ought to be asking the question, how good can I take care of myself? And we don't do that because the body is really a miracle. Take this whole alcohol thing. We've got doctors out there recommending that people drink alcohol because it reduces your risk of heart disease. And they're telling the truth.
Those are the red wines.
Well, red wines, and even go so far as any type of alcohol. They're telling the truth.
Okay.
But unfortunately, I think it's not a good general message for people, because the amount of harm done in our society by alcohol, the traffic accidents, the people who die and are maimed, the abuse, the spousal abuse, the people who die from other alcohol-related diseases, any slight benefit you get from heart disease is offset by the tragedy.
I think you're right. And my wife is a very avid member of Mothers Against Drunk Driving. In fact, we have 2 little red ribbons we tie on our antennas of our car and drive around town hoping somebody will notice.
It's a sad situation. That's why I think that the health profession, even though there is some truth to it, should not be an advocate of alcohol consumption. But, you know, there is some truth to the red wine thing.
There is.
That's right. You know, red wine will reduce your risk of dying of heart disease, and it does it in several ways. The first way, which you all ought to think about, is alcohol is a no cholesterol, very low fat food.
Well, so you like it then?
Well, you know, I want to tell you some of the positive things after I really put it in perspective. It's a no cholesterol, low fat food. In fact, the cleanest arteries that I've ever seen in my medical career were among my pure vegetarians that were taken off Skid Row, and their vegetarian diet was a vodka.
Uh-oh.
And their arteries were clean.
That's perspective.
They died of cirrhosis of the liver, but they had clean arteries, I'll tell you. That's one way it reduces your risk of dying of heart disease. The other thing is red wine has some antioxidant properties, and we talk about how oxidized cholesterol is most damaging to the arteries, and so you have some antioxidant properties. Then in that way it will reduce your risk of dying of heart disease. Have I sold it to you yet?
Well, I'm just wondering if I get the image of you sitting in your spa at the end
Drinking
of a long day, having a glass of red wine. Is that the right image?
Well, I don't think so quite
All
yet.
right.
But let me give you one more thing, one more selling point, and it is, again, you know, you need to know all the facts, is that wine and other alcohols, they thin the blood. And part of this process of having a heart attack or stroke is the blood clots, and it forms what we call thrombosis, and it cuts off the blood supply to the heart or the brain. And so in that way it also reduces the risk of dying of heart disease. But this whole business with the French paradox is really blowing out of line. You know, the French, they used to eat a healthier diet. It's just their new diet that is really high in fat. And it'll take a few years before you really see the high death rate among the French. There's a minimal amount of protection when it comes to consuming alcohol. And the way you want to protect yourself from heart disease, Wayne, is you want to eat a healthy diet, not add a glass of wine on top of your bacon and eggs.
I'll buy that.
Yeah, I'm sure you would. And we're going to be back in a moment. We're going to talk about a related subject to some extent. We're going to talk about stress and lifestyle with Dr. Richard Neal.
Thanks for watching Hello Channel. Learn the language of the internet, travel, commerce, and diplomacy. Watch Hello Channel and learn English. Do it for yourself.
I'll be honest, at first, I was really frightened. Can you imagine a man my size playing hopscotch? But you know what? It really got things going. We related.
I just stopped what I was doing and asked my daughter what she wanted to do.
Very good. Next week's assignment is to eat dinner together every night and tell me what changes in your family. Class dismissed.
Give your family everything. Give them your time. From the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
And joining us to talk about a subject that I don't talk about near enough, and that's stress, is Dr. Richard Neal, MD. The name of the book is Stress, Taming the Tyrant. It's a tyrant in everybody's life.
Exactly.
And I must mention, Dr. Neal's here under a little bit of stress himself. He's got a bit of laryngitis, as you'll notice. But is stress all that bad?
Well, it's hard to put your finger on it exactly. This is one of the reasons why the American Heart Association has had difficulty in quantifying it. It's something that's around in everybody's life, and after having practiced medicine for 30 years, I see a lot of it under the covers, as it were.
Yeah, but Dr. Neal, I have to tell you, for me, stress is important. It gets me to resolve problems and get the job done. I mean, without stress, I mean, I'd lay back on the beach with a book and my life would be ruined. It'd be a disaster.
There's no question. You're surrounded tonight.
You like stress too?
I love stress. I thrive on stress.
Why? Well, why get rid of it?
You need a certain amount. You don't get rid of stress. You manage it. You control it. You modify it. You don't get rid of it. You're absolutely right. You need some.
You have it work to your advantage.
Yes.
You know, another thing I have trouble with stress, and I don't mean to be so difficult here in the beginning of our interview, but another thing I have difficulty with in terms of stress is it's not tangible. I can't get my arms around
Exactly.
it. And whereas food, you know, or drink or smoking or whatever, they're things you tell me, yes, I do it, or don't I do it. Whereas you tell me not to be stressed, I don't know where to start.
The fact that you can't get your hands around it, it makes it very insidious, and that's why it's so dangerous. You really have to have a feel for yourself, what's going on inside. And in many cases, the people around you can help you get a finger on that.
Well, Dr. Richard Neal, how do I know whether this stress is good stress, which gets my problems resolved and the job's done, or stress that's destructive to me and is turned against my body?
Stress is only bad when there's too much or when it's not modified. Otherwise, it's good. We need stress to grow. A child must learn to walk and fall. When you eat carrots, you could cut your soft palate, but you eat them anyhow. So stress is good so long as it creates growth, so long as it's associated with something that's expanding. It's negative when it begins to tear down your life forces and begins to cause disease.
And you'll notice that?
Yes, you will.
But
you may not pay attention.
just by the ringing of the siren of the ambulance? I mean, how do you notice this?
You may not pay attention to it, but you'll notice it. The burning stomach, the sleepless nights, the headache at the back of your head, it feels like somebody's sort of pushing on you. Those things all indicate too much stress.
And when you get too much stress, you decide you have enough. Just to say that our viewing audience feels that stress is a very negative thing in their life, is destroying it, making life less than it could be for them, and they've identified it. What do they do next about it?
You start learning how to modify it. And one of the best places to do that is with your physician, especially if the physician is in distress himself.
Well, come on now. It's just, you know, I can't remember any more education on stress in my medical school training than I had on food, which was basically nothing. How's your physician going to help you in terms of stress?
Because
tranquilizers.
When he talks to you about the need for tranquilizers, when he talks about you with the need for anti-inflammatory agents, when he talks about the need for anti-ulcer medications, he's talking about stress.
But that's drug therapy, and we're not getting into the cause of the problem.
No, we're not. But those are the indications that you need to do something about it. Well, that headache that you have that's persistent, stress.
So one of the indications is the doctor brings out his prescription pad, then you know you got stress.
Not necessarily, but that may be a clue. There are things for which the prescription pad is needed. But when he says you need a tranquilizer, you need something for your ulcers or for your hyperacidity, or you need something for your headache, and I want something to calm you down, clues about stress.
Okay, so you say you have stress and you don't want to take the drugs. What if you decide that stress is not due to tranquilizer pill deficiency or due to anti-ulcer pill deficiency? What if you say it's due to something else going on in my life, and I'm the kind of person who wants to get to the bottom of things? What do I do to identify the cause of my stress, and what action do I take?
One of the best ways to identify the cause of stress in that kind of context is to talk to people around you, especially people who love you and are close to you, such as your wife or your children or even your boss. If you go to them and reflect the fact that you're having problems, sometimes they can help identify what's going on and help you find solutions for it.
Dr. Neal, what are the greatest causes of stress? Can we have sort of a descending list of what it is that stresses people?
I tell people, if you want to reduce your stress by about 75%, stop trying to control people.
Control other people?
Yes. Children, spouses, employees.
You got any good techniques for that?
I was holding a seminar once, and we were talking about managing stress in that context. And a person raised her hand and said, if you can't control people, How can you get them to do what you want them to do? The answer, they must buy into your vision. Whether it's a child with a bad report card or an employee that's balking, if that person will buy into what you're trying to do, what you're seeing, you don't need to control. And if you have to control, it means they don't buy into it.
So you've got to be a good salesman.
Exactly.
You got to present your idea, and you got to get your wife and your boss and so on to buy into what you're doing, and then life goes well for you.
As long as they buy into it. And if they don't, maybe your idea is wrong.
And then you go on to something else.
Yes.
And so you're talking about relieving interpersonal stresses.
Interpersonal relationships, and stop trying to control people.
But I'd have to say, for most of the folks that I know out there, they believe stress comes from not having enough money, not getting along with their spouse, having some type of loss in their life, a loss of another person, or a loss of a job, or a financial loss. You know, stress comes from a lot of other areas besides interpersonal relationships, and I'd like to find out from you how we identify those things. And I want some real tangible ways. I hate to be so demanding, Dr. Richard Neal, but I'm the kind of guy that wants tangible steps. You tell me 1, 2, 3, this is what you got to do, and your life's going to be better. And that's kind of advice that I'd like to share with my viewers. And we'll be back in just a moment and share with you some more information about stress, taming the tyrant, with Dr. Richard Neal.
Learn English at home. Just say hello.
And you've always wanted to know this, how to control, manage, and modify stress, taming the tyrant. And we have the tyrant tamer here, Dr. Richard Neal, MD. He's in preventive medicine and tries to help people in their lives in terms of modifying stress. And we talked about controlling relationships, but how about other things that cause stress in life? Losing jobs, having difficulty with your spouse. What do you do in that situation to identify the problem and do something about it?
Let's take a look at how one can define stress. Stress is not what happens to you. It's how you see what happens to you. We all live in the same world. And people who have negative things happen to them need to change their perceptions. That's how you change the impact of the stressor. Control, we talked about. Perception is a second leg of that three-legged stool.
But when you lose your job, it's pretty hard to be smiling about it.
No question about it. But you can see that also as an opportunity to find a new one.
Right.
That's not too Pollyannish.
So it's to take a positive, to take it and turn it into something positive.
Exactly.
Dr. Neal, aren't there people who have stressed personalities?
Type A.
Type A personalities.
Double A.
I'm thinking of John here, for example.
Yeah, I thought so.
Is there any way that however skilled you might be, you could cure a man like John?
Yes, he can be cured.
No tranquilizers, thank you.
But that's right. It has to be through his diet. Can you do it through his diet?
The typical cure for that kind of type A-ness does not come through diet as such.
I see.
Some of the people who deal with hyperactivity in children have found, however, that certain dietary regimens may change the hyperactivity. But for the type A person, Dr. Friedman, who is one of the co-founders of the type A type mindset, did an experiment. In fact, he was funded to change type A's into type B's. They had to stop the experiment after 2 years because they found they were so successful, it would have been unethical to continue on with that. And what they did was to take these type A persons and, in essence, force them to be type B's, because type A-ness is not something that is an incurable disease. It's a learned reaction complex. It's something that people learn.
You're absolutely convinced of that, I guess.
Yes.
I had thought the best I could hope for, John, was to have a type B attitude about my type A personality, but I guess that won't do.
Yeah.
Well, you don't need to change type A's to type B's. As long as the type B is aware of what's going on in their life and how detrimental it can be, they can modify themselves.
So it'll be a modification at best and
Yes.
never a complete change of personality.
That's right. You wouldn't want him the other way.
Would it be fair to just say an aggressive, a hard-working person, a person who really is a go-getter? You don't have to call him a type A, do you? Or you don't have to call him destructive. I don't really feel that my enthusiasm is in any way destructive to me.
No, enthusiasm is not the definition for type A.
There must be something different.
They have certain characteristics. They tend to be aggressive and assertive and almost combative. They have anger. They have time urgency. They speak rapidly. They jab the air with their fingers.
They're not having fun either, are they?
No, well, it's sort of perverse fun.
Oh, I see. Okay, so we're going to relieve the stress in our lives. Meditation?
Meditation is fine as long as one has something to meditate about.
How about religion?
Religion is great as long as you have the right focus.
What's the
about-
wrong focus?
I come from a Christian ethic.
Okay.
And the Christian ethic, the thing that distinguishes it from other religions is what God does for me rather than what I do for him. So if I'm focused on what I must do for God, that tends to increase my stress. If I'm focused on what he does for me, it tends to relieve it.
I see.
And how about exercise?
Exercise is a great stress reducer.
So let me get, did I get my tangible points out from you then?
I suspect so.
Exercise
Yes.
and faith and maybe some meditation. Biofeedback, do you do that in your practice?
I don't use biofeedback. That's a very positive kind of thing. It could be used nicely. I want to camp on perceptions.
Okay.
What a person feeds into their mind dictates their perceptions.
You know, this is an old philosophy. I mean, not an old philosophy. It's been around for forever and ever and ever. It's what you think is what you are. Are you that
Exactly.
kind of person who believes that?
Yes. And what you read is what you are. And what your parents feed into is what you are. You can't constantly feed children negative images and have them come up be positive people.
Well, you know, I like that kind of thought because then that gives you an option to do something. Instead of saying, well, you're stuck as a stressful or emotionally distressed person, or you inherited it through your genes. I mean, you're talking about something that we can do something
Yes.
about.
I like to tune people away from the soaps, for example.
Soap operas.
Yes.
You're making a lot of enemies.
That's all right. They'll be healthy enemies.
No, I see.
That reduces your stress.
So what kind of things would you have people watch?
I would have them try to turn away from TV a bit and start reading good, solid books.
Read good books?
Yes.
Have good
Talking.
conversations with
Yes.
people?
Make sure your friends are the kind that add to your life rather than detracting from it.
Well, those are all ideal things to do, but you know, Dr. Neal, most of us feel out of control. Most of us feel like we can't take that initial step to get control of the situation, to start moving in the direction that you talk about is really ideal. No one would argue with you these points, but what we need to do, what I need, and what I would need in my practice to help my patients, is I'd need to have some mechanisms, some things to utilize to my patients where I said, Wayne, what I want you to do is I want you to show up on Tuesday night at a meeting on stress relief, or I want you to go see this particular person who's dealt with stress problems, who's going to teach you a technique so that you can start getting your life in order. Because honestly, I think most people feel out of control when they're in this situation. They feel hopeless and helpless. And so what I want you to focus on for me in the next segment is how do we get a hold of this thing, get started going in a positive direction. We'll be back to talk more about stress, taming the tyrant in just a moment.
Learn English and have fun.
And with me is Dr. Richard Neal, MD. He also has his master's in public health. He's involved in preventive medicine. He has a book, Stress, Taming the Tyrant, How to Control, Manage, and Modify Stress, which is what we all want to do. And when I asked him how we start this out, how we get involved in this, he was kind enough to tell me about his seminars that he teaches, and we'll give you information on that at the end of the show. Seminars, people come to seminars to listen to you talk about how to relieve stress. Do
Exactly.
they do anything in these seminars? You know, any exercises, any type of mantra techniques, anything besides listen to a lecture?
I don't use mantras, but there are exercises that can help. And beside that, you want to give people exercises that they can use at home,
Right.
not just physical, but mental
Tangible
exercises
things.
as
See,
well.
I keep trying to get back to that. I want to have something I can go do 10 minutes every day and make myself happier and healthier.
One of the best things is to start exercising.
Just physical exercise.
Yes, sir. No
That
question.
does relieve stress.
Sure it does.
How about different types of activities people have? Folks tell me that their life's tough all week long until they go out to the golf course.
There you go.
That's great as long as you don't want to break clubs when you finish. And I don't do that because it's too stressful for me.
Stressful.
Golf is
Yes.
stressful for you.
It's stressful for
It's
me.
one of the most relaxing things I do.
That's because you're type B and I'm type A.
That must be it.
Yeah.
You're type A, you're admitting this
Oh, yeah.
right here
I'm
on this show,
Severely afflicted, but I modify it.
and you have it under control.
Yes, sir.
And it's made your life better.
Yes, it has.
And your family will attest to that?
Yes, they sure will. They better.
What kind of things do you do to help modify your stress? Because it's getting around to the point where we're seeing where this all came from, as it came out of Dr. Neal, didn't it?
Yes,
Out of a difficult life that you wanted to make better for yourself.
exactly. My wife and I walk together.
Uh-huh.
Great way to communicate. In the evening, especially, with the dog by ourselves. We just walk. I also play the piano. So when I come home, I'm feeling tense.
That'd be
I'll
stressful
tend to
for
play.
me.
What?
I
Yes.
don't play it.
It could
It's
be
stressful for those around me too.
Those are the two main things: music and the exercise.
And people should identify those things, shouldn't they?
Exactly. Something else that's very important, I think, is the identification of goals in life. In my practice, I find a lot of people under stress because they simply don't know what they're supposed to be doing with themselves. They're waiting for the world to bat them around and make them successful. I find people are less stressful when they have a focus and a goal in mind and they're working toward it.
And people can do that, can't they? I mean,
Exactly.
they can sit down and decide what they want to do. And I suppose there are even counselors out there to help people decide on vocations, directions, soul searching, and search things out. How about psychologists and psychiatrists? You know, you're not either. You're a medical doctor in preventive medicine. Do you have any strong feelings about those two professions?
Not negatively. The only concern I have is when problems like stress, which I see as psychosocial, religious problems, are treated with medication. I don't think that that solves the problem, and in fact, it may delay solution.
So you're not really a person who advocates antidepressants and tranquilizers and so on as a first-line therapy? Because I kind of got that impression when we were talking a minute ago. You think people should deal with the underlying problem?
Exactly. And most of the time, again, in my experience, it's been the person who's either misperceiving or perceiving negatively what's happening to them, or they're trying to control people. Children, especially parents with children, tremendous stressors because the parents want those kids to act right.
Yes.
They won't do it. Or the wife wants her husband to do things right. He should cut the grass. He won't do it.
And you can't get them to do it, so we shouldn't take that in.
No.
We should decide we'll let well enough alone. People do them their own way.
We need to help people catch a vision of what their lives are about, of how they should behave, of what they want from life, to work cooperatively with us. Wise parents do that. Wise husbands and wives do that.
But sometimes parents and husbands and wives aren't the best people to do that, are they?
To help the person see the vision.
Aren't they in contests sometimes so that there's conflict rather than... I mean, if you and your wife were fighting all the time and you suggested that she engage in your vision, it probably wouldn't be that effective.
Well, when you both have different visions, that will occur. What you need to do is find another vision. You don't compromise. You may need to find an alternative.
I see.
That's a difficult thing for
As long as
people
you
that
both
are
agree
that
to do
close
it.
together
Yes,
to
it's
do.
work. It's hard work.
It'd be a lot easier to take a walk with the dog.
Exactly, yeah. Or leave.
Or leave home. And that would be recommended in some situations. If you have a bad job or a bad marriage, bad relationships, I mean, sometimes the only option to get out of that stress is to leave, isn't it?
That's true, unless one can change one's perception.
Is it fair, you know, guys, I'm getting a lot of this message, and we had another half an hour to go along with this, I'd probably get it all. But is it fair to say that what we really do is you need to face up to things, identify them and face up to them,
You need to identify them, yes, in terms of the stressors, and deal with them.
and take action? Well, this book will get you started. It's How to Control, Manage, and Modify Stress, Taming the Tyrant. Thank you very much for being with me, Dr. Richard
pleasure.
Neal. It was a real pleasure having you.
Thank you.
And folks, join us next week.